Hello and welcome back to Freedom Behavioral Health Solutions Exposure Lab explanation of how one picks up a phobia. So what we're going to be building off of with part one is the explanation for what it is, and then part two is going to be about how it changes. So part one involves the two-factor theory. And the two-factor theory involves a specific behavior modification principle called classical conditioning and operant conditioning. So classical conditioning, also called Pavlovian conditioning, if that sounds familiar, if that one rings a bell, is literally where that phrase comes from. Classical conditioning is where you pair one thing with another thing. So think of Pavlov's dog, where you ring a bell, you give the dog food, you ring a bell, you give the dog food, and eventually what happens when you ring that bell is that the dog salivates. Or another one is a classic one is little Albert, which is a sad but valuable lesson of classical conditioning between a kid and being afraid of a white rat. And so they would make a loud noise every time this kid would see a rat, and eventually he became conditioned through pairing or classical conditioning to have a fear response of the white rat. So the two-factor theory, part of it is trying to pair the stimuli with something aversive. So this is a rat in a plexiglass box, and they place this rat in a box. And with this, they have this little mesh at the bottom of this. And they plug it in, and the rat was calm, and he was smelling the environment and cleaning his face. All of a sudden he gets these not damaging but painful zaps on his feet. So he starts hopping around, and eventually he finds a way to jump through this little window into the other plexiglass box. And he feels better. And so they take the rat out and they go through multiple trials. They put the rat back in, they shock him, they put him, he jumps over, so on and so forth. So eventually this box, which was, let's say, inert, it had no value to the rat whatsoever, now has a specific value, and it starts to become paired with pain. And so that's the classical condition of pairing pain or something aversive with some type of stimuli. In this case, it'd be an object. And the object in your life might be spider or snake or driving or anything. Even a memory can be that aversion. So what happens here is that once the rat has enough conditioning, the closer it gets to this is where operant conditioning comes into play. Think of it like reward versus punishment. The closer the rat gets to this, the more the fight or flight response starts to kick in, because he's getting closer to the aversive stimuli. And so it's not even when it's safe in the boxes, there's no shocking whatsoever. The rat will always get that aversive feeling, the physiological feeling, the fight or flight response kicking in, that sympathetic nervous system kicking in. And so it immediately jumps in there. So operant conditioning is that reward or punishment where something is, in this case, placed onto the rat, and they're feeling it, and once he does a behavior, that sensation is taken off, and it will always keep that alive for him. So to understand this is going to go with part two of how to undo this. So the major pieces I want you to hold on to is classical conditioning. Some way, somehow, an individual was accidentally or intentionally trained to have an aversion, a physiological reaction, a fight or flight response, the sympathetic nervous system kick in for this thing. And then the escape is what keeps it alive. So stay with me for part two, and we'll talk about how to get out of this conundrum.